quickly approaching, and we know that many of you will soon embark on your religious pilgrimage to Mecca or Hajj. We therefore believe now would be an opportune time to remind you of your general rights and responsibilities as an air traveler. Presenting today's session will be Veronica Lazier, Civil Rights Director at CARE Oklahoma. Along with myself, my name is Maha Syed, and I'm a staff attorney at the CARE National Office. For those of you who are unfamiliar with CARE, or the Council on American Islamic Relations, we are America's largest Muslim civil rights and advocacy organization, and our mission is to enhance the understanding of Islam, protect civil rights and liberties, empower American Muslims, and build coalitions that promote justice and mutual understanding. We have 30 offices in 22 different states across the country, and we're headquartered right here in Washington, D.C. In our Civil Rights Department, we generally handle cases involving discrimination in which individuals have been denied public accommodations, placed on government watch lists, visited by the FBI, or treated unlawfully by the government based solely on their religious affiliation. In today's webinar, we'll provide you with a basic introduction on civil rights and an overview on airport security measures. We'll also highlight what you should know with respect to your rights and various procedures at airports, and we'll also review and practice scenarios to apply what we've learned during the training. Veronica?
Thank you, Maha. Sure. Thank you, Maha, for introducing me. I will be going over what are our civil rights. So civil rights are quite simply your rights to be treated the same as anyone else and to be free from persecution by the government, social organizations, and private individuals. You have the right to be free from discrimination on the basis of your race, religion, color, national origin, gender, sexual orientation or gender identity, disability, and age. Your civil rights in the United States come from three major places. The first is the Constitution of the United States, namely the Bill of Rights. Some examples of civil rights that are contained in the Bill of Rights might be the freedom of speech and religion that is contained in the First Amendment, or the freedom from unreasonable search and seizure that's found in the Fourth Amendment. The second source of civil rights in the United States is federal and state laws. For example, we have the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and Title VII of that act provides equal employment opportunities and prohibits discrimination in employment. And then the third and final source of civil rights is judicial precedent, which means decisions made by the Supreme Court that are binding on lower courts are very important to protect your civil rights as well. So when you go to the airport, who are those people there who check your bags and ask to see your ID and your boarding pass? At airports, there are two organizations that are responsible for airport security. One is the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, or CBP. Their job is to secure the homeland by preventing the illegal entry of people and goods, but still facilitate legitimate travel and trade. They're located at the borders, or when you enter or leave the United States. The other organization that's responsible for airport security is the Transportation Security Administration, or TSA. TSA conducts safety-related searches in the airports for weapons and explosives, and they are located at the security checkpoints that you go through both internationally and domestically. So the first step when you go to the airport and you plan to travel by air is primary screening. This is the part where you take off your shoes, your jackets, your jewelry, and your outer layers of clothing, and then you step through a metal detector or are wanded to see if there's any other metal on your body. Primary screening also consists of either entering into a body scanner device or an intensive pat-down by TSA personnel. It's really important to remember these things about the body scanning devices. You are allowed to opt out of those body scanners and not step through them. But if you do opt out, TSA is going to require that you submit to an enhanced pat-down. This pat-down should be done by an officer of your same gender. If they don't begin with that, you can request that pat-down be done by an officer of your same gender. You may request a private room, but there is no right to a faster processing time. So if that's something that you need, be prepared to face a significant delay. So during this pat-downs, TSA requires a pat-down for all travelers who are wearing what they consider to be baggy clothing. Hijabs may be considered baggy clothing. So for those of you who wear hijab or other similar head coverings, be prepared for TSA to require a pat-down as you go through airport security. TSA has also started a process called explosive trace detection swabbing. This is where they take a small swab to test your palms and check for traces of explosives. This swabbing might occur in the checkpoint line, during the screening that you're going through, or at your gate. They can also swab your electronics or the handles of your luggage to detect for those traces of explosives. This screening method is usually applied randomly, and like other screening methods, it cannot be applied in a discriminatory fashion. So they can't single you out for your race or your ethnic origin or your religion to be subjected to the swabbing. So just very briefly, your rights when it comes to airport security checkpoints. TSA is allowed to detain you briefly if they feel that you are a security risk, especially if you are doing a specific illegal activity. They may ask you to submit to a pat-down even if you have gone through the body scanner device. They may ask you to open your carry-on luggage and to search through your belongings. And they may ask you briefly about your citizenship status and where you are traveling. However, there are a number of things that TSA is not allowed to do. They're not allowed to ask you personal or intrusive questions without cause. They're not allowed to target you for additional screening based solely on your race or religion. They cannot handcuff or strip search you without probable cause that you have committed or are going to commit a crime. They definitely are not allowed to force you to remove items of religious clothing, such as a hijab, without a private room. And if you have requested a pat-down from someone of your same gender, they can't force you to submit to a pat-down from someone of a different gender. So just a brief review. While you're traveling through airport checkpoints, be prepared to have to remove your shoes, jackets, and outer layers of clothing. However, they cannot require you to remove hijab without placing you in a private room. Be prepared to walk through the body scanner devices, or if you opt out of the body scanner, be prepared to submit to a more intense pat-down. That pat-down can be done by a TSA crew member of your same gender at your request, and it may also be done in a private room, but that could cause you significant delays through your travel. Also be prepared to experience the explosive trace detection swabbing, where they'll take a small pad and rub it over your palms to check for traces of explosives. Importantly, TSA is not allowed to target you for additional security screening at checkpoints without on the basis of your religion or your race, but they can detain you very briefly if they feel you're doing a specific illegal activity. They also can ask you to open your carry-on, and they may search your belongings.
Thanks so much, Veronica. So in general, you should also understand that the U.S. government has broad authority and discretion to question and conduct searches of people and items at the border and at various U.S. entry ports. Because of this broad discretion, keep in mind that the CBP officials can question you regarding your citizenship or immigration status, the purpose of your trip, and items that you've brought to and from your trip. CBP can also confiscate your electronics if they have reasonable suspicion that evidence of a crime may be found in them, but they must provide you with an inventory form and receipts that lists the item taken and outlines the procedures you need to follow in order to retrieve them again. Keep in mind, however, that case law in this area is extremely fluid and unsettled at the moment. Nevertheless, however, CBP is still authorized to take your electronics currently. They may also detain you for secondary screening, which may be more thorough and extensive than the primary screening in which Veronica previously outlined. And finally, they do have the right to search you and your belongings. Although CBP's search authority is expansive at U.S. borders, it is not completely unfettered. As such, CBP also has limits on the extent to which it can search individuals and items passing through the border. For example, the CBP cannot perform a strip search or a body cavity search without reasonable suspicion that you are concealing some type of contraband. They cannot hold you for prolonged secondary screening without giving you an opportunity to request the presence of an attorney. And they also cannot prevent you from entering the U.S. entirely if you are a U.S. citizen. If you find yourself in need of a space to perform your daily prayers, keep in mind that most airports have multi-faith prayer and meditation rooms or chapels available for you to use. It's always best practice to utilize these specially designated rooms to perform your prayers and not to disrupt or cause safety concerns in public areas, which are oftentimes extremely crowded and busy at airports. You should consult the airport's information desk to find location and hours of these rooms. If your airport does not have a designated prayer area, feel free to contact your local CARE chapter so that we may further assist and look into the matter. Another major issue that may arise for some passes, flyers, and individuals, and that you should be aware of, is the existence of the Terrorist Screening Database, or TSDB. The TSDB is the government's central database that contains secret information on known and suspected terrorists, and it's operated by the FBI's Terrorist Screening Center, or TSC. It was created shortly after 9/11, and because of the extreme secrecy surrounding government watch lists, people generally only discover that they are on it when they are denied boarding on a flight or subjected to some form of heightened screening at the airport, either continuously or on a one-time basis. Individuals may be placed on the TSDB regardless of their citizenship status, and the database includes sublists with separate criteria and categories, which include the no-fly list. Information provided in the database contains two kinds of data on each individual: identifying information and substantive information, linking the individual to actual terrorism on a reasonable suspicion standard. People cannot be placed on government watch lists based solely on their protected First Amendment activities, such as religious exercise, association, or free speech rights. And it does not suspend their Fourth Amendment rights. As such, being on a watch list is not probable cause for arrest. An individual who is stopped is still within his or her authority to refuse consent to searches and questioning, absent, of course, a warrant issued by a magistrate or judge. And then at borders and ports of entry, the government may temporarily stop and question a U.S. citizen, but can now altogether refuse them from entering back into the country. The TSDB also includes subcategories that divide individuals according to the level of threat they pose to national security. The no-fly list includes a list of people who are prohibited from boarding a commercial aircraft altogether. If you are completely denied boarding and the ability to fly, then you know that you are likely on the no-fly list. Recent reports have indicated that the no-fly list contains about 81,000 names, but it's also been reported that fewer than 1,000 of those names are actually those defined as U.S. persons. The TSA selectee list, on the other hand, is a much longer list, and it includes individuals who, for some reason, are considered a threat to aviation security. Individuals on the selectee list are nevertheless allowed to board a plane after being subjected to enhanced screening. If you're unable to print your boarding ticket online or at a kiosk, or if your boarding pass is stamped with triple or quadruple S, if you're subjected to extra screening and higher scrutiny, or told to wait while an ticketing agent runs a check on your name, then you're likely on a TSA selectee list. But at the same time, you are still allowed to board. You're likely on a selectee list and not on a no-fly list. If you believe that you've been wrongfully placed on a government watch list, there are ways to address your concerns. There are administrative remedies available, and primarily under the DHS TRIP form, which Veronica will cover in more detail later on in this presentation. So to summarize what we've gone over so far, if you have any difficulties during travel, then you should remember to assert your rights, but always do this in a calm and respectful manner so that you don't create a disruption or give authorities more reason to subject you to extra scrutiny. You should also ask why you are being subject to questions about your personal life and beliefs, which do not relate to your travel. You should always ask to speak to a supervisor because they're oftentimes better capable of addressing any concerns you may have, communicating the agency's policies, and correcting any improper behavior that may have occurred. Of course, you should always document the name, agency, badge number, and contact number of everyone you speak to throughout your experience. And if you feel like you've been treated in a discriminatory fashion, then you should make complaints with the appropriate agencies, with, of course, including the information and details you gathered throughout the process. And lastly, contact any CARE chapter in the event that you need further assistance.
Next, we're going to give you some tips on packing for travel. The following items should not be packed in checked bags. Don't pack your jewelry, cash, laptop computers, other electronics, wrapped gifts, or fragile items because those will often be damaged. Film will be damaged by screening equipment, so avoid packing that in your checked luggage. And batteries and other equipment should stay with you in your carry-on luggage and not your checked bags. Now, checked bags are the ones that you leave at the airport counter and that don't come with you in the cabin of the plane. Other tips when you're packing, try not to stack books because they look very, very dense on airport scanners. Remember to have ID tags inside and outside your luggage so that you can identify which luggage is yours. And try to use TSA-approved locks so that if your luggage is selected for additional screening, the lock isn't completely destroyed or your suitcase isn't destroyed. Some of the most important advice is simply, when in doubt, leave it out. It's always better not to pack something that could subject you to additional scrutiny or require your luggage to go through any additional screening. So some notes on returning from Hajj. Keep Zamzam waters in your checked luggage because airport policies now prohibit any liquids over 3 ounces in your carry-on luggage. If you're bringing back any dates, make sure that they're properly dried or shrink wrapped, that they're not really will have a lot of moisture in them. Make sure that your clothes and your shoes are clean from any soil because the Customs and Border Protection has very strict rules about the entry of foreign soil and contaminants into the United States. Any currency worth more than 10,000 US dollars, and as well as any items received or purchased, must be declared at Customs, and there will be forms provided to you on your airplane for you to complete before you land. If you have any problems while traveling, and once you return home, your first step is to complete, to go through the U.S. Department of Homeland Security's Traveler Redress Inquiry Program, or TRIP. So that process is called DHS TRIPS, that you can utilize if you've experienced any difficulty during travel screening at TSA checkpoints or at Customs. When you should use this service is if you have been unable to print a boarding pass from a kiosk or off the internet, you've been denied boarding your plane, or you've been severely delayed through screening processes. If your ticket agent had to call someone or check your name against a list before you're able to get a boarding pass for your flight. If you're on the no-fly list and can't travel at all, if you're continuously referred for additional screening at the airport, or your boarding pass is marked with a triple or quadruple S, and if you've been unfairly detained during your travel or unfairly denied entry into the United States and you're a U.S. citizen. Contact your local CARE chapter for help filing a DHS TRIPS. You will be at that point required to submit the documentation and a copy of your passport. This is where it's very important to take down as much detail if you face any problems while you're traveling. So things like the time and the date, the location, the agent's name and badge number, and the names of any supervisors that you might have spoken to. That will all be extremely relevant when you're filling out a TRIPS form. And then if you have any problems at any point in the airport, ask agents. Don't be afraid to ask agents for their names and badge numbers so that you can identify them later through your notes and use that to file a successful complaint. Thank you so much for joining us for this short Hajj Know Your Rights presentation. If you have any questions at this time for me or for Maha, please use the chat box to type your question, or you can email us after the webinar. Our email addresses are available from earlier in the slide, and we can make those available to you if you have any further inquiries or comments that you'd like to make. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Yes. Our first question is, what if they refuse to give their full name and badge number? Veronica, do you want to respond to that?
Sure. If they refuse to give their full name and badge number, this is where it's very important to speak with a supervisor or to enlist the help of another agent who might be nearby or other witnesses. Supervisors have the power to address this inappropriate behavior, and they have the power to give you more clarification on their policies. So continue to take down the notes, if possible, of the location of your security checkpoint of the date and the time in the airport, and then continue to ask to speak to a supervisor if you have additional problems.
Exactly, and supervisors generally provide you with their names at the very least in order for you to follow up with your complaint, because they understand the many complaints that are received on a daily basis from their employees. However, again, if they still refuse to give their full name and badge number, then this is where a detailed description always helps. You want to gather relevant information, like the age, the range and age of the officer that you've encountered, the gender, race, time you spoke with the person, and location of where it occurred. So that's why if you aren't able to get a full name and badge number, you want to make sure that you document all other descriptions available to you. And again, always remain respectful and calm, because it's not in your favor to overreact in any way or become too aggressive or angry.
Okay, our next question, can CBP ask you about how much money you're carrying even if you're carrying less than 10,000 US dollars, and are you required to answer them? Maha?
Thanks, Veronica. I believe they can still ask you that question because it's within the scope of their authority, which is relatively broad, as long as it relates to the travel and purpose of your travel. So if they do insist on asking you that, you should be responsive. However, you are absolutely required and mandated by law to report anything over $10,000.
Another question, can they force you to submit to a pat down of your turban rather than allowing you to do it yourself, even if no alarms have gone off? That to me sounds very irregular, because one of the rights that most airports grant is that if you are being subjected to a pat down, that they have to allow you to do that yourself. That's generally their policy. This is a good time when you might want to ask for a supervisor and ask them why they are requiring you to submit to a pat down done by someone else rather than allowing you to pat down your turban or outer clothing on your own. So Unfortunately, their policy is to allow you to do the pat down yourself, but individual agents don't always comply with that policy. So that might be a good reason for you to ask to speak to a supervisor or file a complaint. Maha, do you want to take the next question?
Sure. Another question was to define briefly in the context of TSA. Unfortunately, we'll be unable to define that. It's highly relative and with respect to the given airport and processing time. Some airports are able to move you through faster than others. However, if you are pulled to the side in any way, away from the general public and passengers who are going through the regular primary screening, pulled to the side and subjected to extra and more invasive searches and questioning, then that is likely beyond the regular scope of a brief screening with respect to TSA standards, and it might also alert you. It might also provide grounds for you to complain later on through the DHS trip process.
Looks like we have a question about obtaining a PDF version of this presentation. Maha, we should be able to email that if we get an email inquiry, correct?
Correct, and we'll also upload it and have it available for the audience as well.
Thank you. Let's see, do we have any other questions? Yes, we do.
Oh, there's another one. If you miss your flight because of TSA CBP activity, even when you've arrived to the airport well before your flight, whose responsibility is it? CBP and TSA are not liable for monetary or time loss. Unfortunately, there is not much recourse here for you to do. However, if you contact the specific airline that you booked your ticket, they're likely to be understanding and issue you a new ticket later in the day. However, TSA and CBP are generally not liable for the monetary and time loss. So that's why if you know that you are generally subjected to extra or heightened screening, you definitely need to put in, make sure that you're giving yourself enough time for that to happen during each and every one of your flights in order to avoid missing it and incurring any monetary loss. I believe that concludes the questions we've received, but of course, like Veronica mentioned, feel free to reach out to us directly in the emails provided or visit our website, www.kier.com, which will provide you with additional information on your rights as an air traveler. Thank you all again for joining us, and we wish you the best and happy holidays.